welcome to today's meeting of the SPA Forensic Services Committee meeting. Should we drop off the call, Chris Cregan will take over to chair the meeting until I'm reconnected. That's assuming we're still quorate. I've got a note that Angela needs to leave at 1 and Katharina Casper will join us. We'll have to leave at 11:30, but for 30 minutes. So as I said to people before the live stream started, the agenda is very, very busy. So if people can bear that in mind. And we're working our way through that. We've got a lot to get through today. Welcome to Stephen McGowan from the Crown Office. I understand that Ruth McQuaid is now retired and Stephen is going to be joining us for future meetings, so delighted to have you. And please, if you see her, wish Ruth our very best. I didn't realise she was retiring, otherwise we'd have made some remark at the last meeting. From Police Scotland, we've got ACC Johnson, who will be joining us at some point. He'll be in and out of the meeting because he has other things on his agenda as well. We've got CDIO Henry, who will be joining us later on, and CS Hilary Sloan, who will be attending for item 4 for the drug driving pilots only. We have DCS Andy Dick attending for item 10, and Gillian Jones, Head of Biometrics, will be here for item 7. We don't have any attendance from PERC. We've got apologies from them. From HMICS, we've got Brian Johnson and Craig Naylor joining us. So again, many welcome to you all. We have apologies from Mary Pitt-Caithley. So on to the substantive business. Do we have any declarations of interest? Is there anything on the agenda? Not seeing any. Grand. Is there anyone that wants to raise anything under any other business? We'll get to that later in the meeting if we do. Nope, not seeing that either. Right, that then moves us on to item 1.5 is the decision to take items in private, and that would be items 12 and 13. And that's in accordance with section 20 of the SPA standing orders. Can members agree to taking items 12 and 13 in private? Seeing some nods there, super. Okay, moves us on then to item 2, which is minutes and actions of the previous meeting. So 2.1 is the minute of the Forensics Services Committee, or the Forensics Committee rather, held on the 8th of May for approval. Can members approve those minutes? Okay, excellent. That then moves us on to the action log and matters arising. We've got 4 actions proposed for closure. Are people content to close those? Seeing any dissent, so if we can agree to close those. Decisions since the last meeting, there have been none, so there's nothing to report on that. So item 3.1 then is the first major item we've got, which is the Forensic Services Director's Report. Fiona Douglas is with us for this. So Fiona, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take my paper as read and just highlight a few areas from within my report. So we'll be coming on later in the agenda to talk about the finance update for forensic services, but it was good to see that the Q1 forecast position is by and large a break-even budget for forensic services for this financial year. I then, within my report, have talked to Operation Portaledge, which has been discussed previously with members in the authority meeting. So this is a large-scale operation that is being undertaken across the justice system by Police Scotland and the Crown Office in relation to organised gang violence in the east and west of Scotland. There's been a large number of arrests that have been made. A large amount of work is being undertaken in forensic services in relation to more than 91 cases that have been submitted, which is 227 individual packages of work, which is being undertaken across multiple different areas of forensic services, including scientists at both the Scottish Crime Campus in Gartcosh and also the Howden Hall Laboratory in Edinburgh and others. Those cases are being expedited at the request of the Lord Advocate. We're providing the intelligence and the evidential reports at the earliest possible opportunity. In order to support that requirement, given the size and scale of Operation Portaledge, there will be some impact on some of the routine work that's undertaken within forensic services, and our managers are continuing to liaise with officers and COPFS colleagues to make sure that there isn't an impact on high priority casework, and a significant amount of additional work is being undertaken, some of that in overtime within forensic services. My report talks to drug driving and some of the issues in relation to drug driving, which I know that we're going to come on and discuss in some detail within the rest of the meeting. So I won't highlight those at this moment in time, but happy to join that conversation as we progress through the agenda today. The Westminster Commission reported on the health of forensic science in England and Wales in June. And they produced a report entitled Pulling Out of the Graveyard Spiral. The report was co-chaired by forensic experts Angela Gallup and Baroness Sue Black. It highlights from their perspective a deep crisis in forensic science in England and Wales, and the cause of that being around significant policy shifts since the closure of the Forensic Science Service, in-house police laboratories, and the challenge of the near monopoly position that has now been created in the market in England and Wales for forensic science through the acquisition of Cellmark Forensic Services by Eurofins. The report makes 34 recommendations, which includes a number of different areas, all the way through from looking at the different types of forensic science discipline, the establishment of independent National Forensic Science Institute to focus on research and development within forensic science, improving legal aid access for defence experts, and reforming the Criminal Cases Review Commission's scientific capacity. Forensic Services met with the Commission in early this year, prior to the publication of the report, and that was a good opportunity to highlight the different model of forensic science delivery in Scotland in comparison with the police privatised market-driven model in England and Wales. And our model of delivery was cited as publicly governed, multidisciplinary and scientifically rigorous in comparison to the fragmentation and decline laid out in England and Wales. The best value audit continues to be undertaken by HMICS and Audit Scotland in relation to best value across policing in Scotland. Forensic Services had previously completed the self-assessment process, and we continue to implement some of the areas where we knew we needed to strengthen different parts of Forensic Services delivery. We have since had sight of some early insights from the work of HMICS and Audit Scotland, and again, we'll be addressing those. We're very pleased to host the Forensic Services Committee for the Development Day on the 9th of June. We covered a range of topics with members, which I hope was helpful. And we met at the Post-Mortem Toxicology Laboratory in Moore Park. So again, was an opportunity for members to have a tour around that facility. We focused on risk and benchmarking alongside a range of other scientific areas for discussion in detail. I'll conclude there, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks very much for that, Fiona. Firstly, I thought the Forensic Service Development Day was absolutely superb, and I know the members that attended that got an awful lot out of it, and there's certainly a lot of food for thought going forward, and so well done to everyone that was involved in that. Operation Portalage, I have to say that's it's quite a significant piece of work. It's a slight understatement there. It's a major piece of work that's going on there. When you say it's going to result in some disruption, what should we be expecting to see in terms of slippage in other performance going forward as a result of having to focus on this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is a really significant and important piece of work. When I say piece of work, that doesn't quite do it justice. But the multiple cases which are being reported, it's complex. It takes a lot of time. So the consequences of that really will be some increased timescales for provision of the more routine casework that's being undertaken. Particularly around areas where we've more limited capacity to undertake the work. So we'll be monitoring that very carefully, but we would expect to see some impact in terms of the key performance indicators that we'll be reporting likely into the next committee meeting for Q2 and Q3 performance.
Yeah, we'll bear that in mind when we discuss that in the next cycle. And I would say I'd have to commend the staff for their role in this, because it is it defies adjectives. It's a critical operation, I think, and obviously forensics are integral to providing support for Police Scotland in this operation. I'm going to throw this open to other members. Does anyone else have any comments or questions? I see, Chris, your hand's up.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona, for your report. It's just one thing that I wondered if you wanted to say a little more about, and you did refer to it in your opening remarks, which was the Westminster Commission report. Obviously, broad range of recommendations there, and good to hear of the engagement that you had, and the rigour and efficacy of Scotland's approach being cited in that engagement. I wondered if you wanted to say a little bit more about how Scotland compares from your perspective against the recommendations in the Commission's report.
Certainly. I think that the Commission found it very helpful to come to Scotland and to look at the differences in how forensic science is delivered here in comparison to England and Wales. I think that one of the key areas which was discussed in detail and is within the report itself is around the fragmentation of how forensic science is delivered within England and Wales, which has been driven through those policy changes following the closure of the Forensic Science Service and more in-house forensic science provision. So a case is broken up into many different parts, which are delivered by many different organisations sometimes. And as a result of that, you lose some of the value that forensic science can bring through having the ability to look at all of the different types of evidence, pull those together, and to be able to provide a statement of opinion to support the police investigation or the prosecution. So the model in Scotland really is value driven. So we are looking at how forensic science can answer questions. And I think that really shines through in terms of the multidisciplinary approach and our ability to be able to look holistically at cases and set strategies. I think the other area which is concerning in England and Wales is how some less used forensic science disciplines are starting to really decline to the point that they will not be available within England and Wales. And I think one of the challenges that we have here in Scotland is to maintain that full crime scene to court multidisciplinary approach all under one roof, which is really the strength of what we deliver. And I'm very keen to support the Commission in terms of the recommendations around the National Forensic Science Institute. I think there's a number of benefits there for Scotland as well as for the whole UK in terms of how do we pull together the limited capacity that is available across the whole of the UK in relation to forensic science research, and how do we target that in the best way possible. So we're focusing on the right areas which are going to make the biggest difference.
Thanks very much. That's helpful and instructive, I think, in terms of our future thinking. Thank you, Fiona.
Super. Angela.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Fiona. That reassurance about what we're learning from Westminster is really encouraging. I think we talked about benchmarking at our development day, so I think this is a live example of it, so well done. Can I just ask for a bit of further clarification on the criminal toxicology and the timescale for the development of the full business case? I note that in your report you mentioned that the Police Scotland haven't been able to allocate the required resources to the project. And if you recall, I have asked about this at previous committees, and not just at this committee, I have to say resources as well. Could you maybe just give an indication of what work is underway to bring this back on track?
No, thank you, Angela. And I think we have established project board for the long-term sustainable model, and we have all the right people around the table at that project board, which is being led from Forensic Services by Sam. What we need to do is to make sure that we are appropriately prioritising that across each of the different areas that are part of that project board. So forensic services obviously have to provide the appropriate resources into that. At the moment, we haven't had the support from estates colleagues within Police Scotland to develop the business case. So we are behind where we would have anticipated to be, and the conversations that we have had through the questions that you've asked previously. So at the moment, the timescale is looking like the summer of next year before the full business case is likely to be at a point to bring back to Resources Committee. That, of course, is dependent upon engagement from estates colleagues within that process to allow us to be able to bring that full business case back to Resources Committee.
Okay, thank you for that, Fiona. Chair, it's maybe something that we should put on the action log, that we would like a further update on this from colleagues in Police Scotland at our next meeting. But if I'll raise it at Resources next week as well, Fiona. Thank you.
Happy to have that. Any other questions? Sorry, just on that, I assume that the outsourcing is within budget levels at the moment. Drug driving.
So in terms of the current level of demand, we are seeing around about a 20% sustained increase in demand over and above what is set out in the Memorandum of Understanding. We'll come on to discuss it within the finance report. It is a pressure on the forensic services budget, but at the current point in time, we are able, through other savings which we are making, to accommodate the additional outsourcing where that's required for the increased routine demand. There are further challenges around incremental rollout or pilots, again, which we'll come on to talk about later in the agenda, which forensic services does not have the budget to be able to support additional outsourcing in those areas.
Okay, and my last question, and I'll move the business on after this, is this Police Strategy Forum. Have you got any insights and learning from that event?
Certainly, I think there was a lot of good discussion at that event. So I was very happy to provide an input looking at the strong model of collaboration that we have, particularly in the context of drug driving, where we've done an awful lot of work over the past 3 years. But there was also some really interesting discussion around public trust and confidence in policing and how to strengthen that. A lot of discussion around the use of artificial intelligence within policing. Discussions around digital forensics, as well as some really interesting discussions around how we need to manage and retain the workforce given societal changes and the different generations, and how we learn and how we need to make sure that we adapt how we manage the organisation to account for changes. So there was a wide range of different areas discussed. I found it very valuable. Vicky Morton also attended that meeting.
Great, super, thanks for that. I'm going to move the business on now. Moves us on to item 3.2, which is the Forensic Services Annual Performance Report. And we have Vicky Morton. Welcome, Vicky, who's going to introduce that. So Vicky, over to you.
That's wonderful, thank you, Chair. So this annual report outlines the Forensic Services performance over the year 24-25, and I'll obviously take this paper as read and summarise some key points. Looking at the executive summary, the case level and the demands have been shown to have decreased over the last year by about 16% or so. But what I would say is that the performance of forensic services against targets has remained strong in most areas, despite there being a number of challenges in the past year and obviously the ongoing organisational change in relation to implementation of the operating model. However, case level data is one way of looking at what activity is performed within forensic services, but it doesn't provide the full picture. And what we are seeing is that, for example, the drugs casework caseload is decreasing from a demand perspective, but the actual activity and the complexity and the number of different tests that have to be performed is increasing. So this is a really interesting part that we are looking at and engaging with our Police Scotland colleagues in with regard to. So over the last 3 years, the output has remained higher than demand, which is a positive, as I've said before. We do obviously recognise that there are areas for improvement, and these have been discussed at previous Forensic Services committees over the last year, and will continue obviously to do so and provide updates. So overall, Forensic Services continue to support partners and provide the vital service needed to deliver justice to the public of Scotland. The rest of the report goes into a bit more detail about demand, but I would like to just point out, first of all, slide 4 gives an update on the cold case review team and the activity that has been performed over the last year. Some really high profile examples of where Forensic Services have really assisted with the development in those areas and moving to prosecution. So that's really well done to members of the staff within Forensic Services who are involved in that activity. Looking at quality performance, slide 5, pleased to report the key thing is that Forensic Services have maintained their accreditation to the international standard ISO 17025, and that's for the 27th consecutive year. So again, a lot of effort in that area and significant activity. Looking then more into the demand and output, and a number of slides 6 and 7 look at that 5-year trend picture with further information in the following slides. Overall, Forensic Services output continues to exceed demand, and as I said, further details are found later on in the report. If we move to slide 8, which looks at it from a crime time perspective, we have seen a decline in the Group 3 crimes of dishonesty. So that involves, for example, house break-ins, motor vehicle thefts, etc. And the demands for this activity have declined. We've really seen that since around the period of COVID in 2020. The reasons behind that will be multifaceted. There's been a lot of change within Forensic Services, a lot of change within Police Scotland and wider society. So there's a significant amount of work being done in a collaborative manner at this point in time with regards to that, to really understand that a bit more. And I'll come back onto that in a minute. Slide 9 provides demand and output data looking at from a lab or a discipline department perspective, and the majority of departments show good levels of performance there, with those demand and outputs being within balance and tolerance. It is recognised that further work is required to improve performance, particularly in the areas of biology VCU, volume crime unit, kind of largely DNA activity, which is shown on the graphs to the left-hand side there, and also with regards to mark enhancement further down in the graph. There has been an impact there in terms of performance, particularly around the timeliness aspect, due to ongoing activities around the local exhaust ventilation within the SEC, one of the sites. What I would say, however, to provide the committee assurance that there are no risks to statutory time limits not being met within these areas. Trend of information is also included in slides 10 and onwards, which again looks like a really positive position in terms of active caseload and case aging from a number of areas. So point out here drugs, fingerprints and toxicology, which have shown improvements. Moving on, more detailed information is included in slides 11 onwards. This focuses on drugs driving. Again, I know that there are papers later on the agenda with regards to that area of the business. There's also information on post-mortem toxicology and scene attendance. If we move to slides 14 and 16, just like to spend a little more time, if that's okay, Chair, with regards to scene attendance. So as mentioned earlier, Police Scotland and Forensic Services, we recognise the number of requests for this type of activity around Group 3. So crimes have reduced. So to understand this better, a short life working group was established in that collaborative manner to understand what could the factors be influencing this data. Trying to understand what was some of the contributing factors, and also to look at improvement opportunities which could be taken forward. Overall, there's a number of actions have been identified which align to that, improving the overall forensic response in this area. They include, for example, reviewing the tasking unit processes. It's, as we know, quite a relatively new unit within forensic services, still in that early bedding in period. So there's activities around that area, also around increasing the awareness across policing in regards to what value forensic science can provide in this area around Group 3 crimes. So overall, it has been recognised that there has been significant changes, as I've said before, and the actions are being taken forward alongside the further insights that have been provided through the customer survey, which again is later on in the agenda. So I'd like to just thank Police Scotland and Forensic Services colleagues who have been involved in this important piece of work for their ongoing commitment. So just to summarise then, good operational performance has been delivered during 24-25. However, it is recognised that there are areas of internal focus which are required where improvement is anticipated, and work is ongoing to support that. And I'd finally like to just recognise the hard work of our people to deliver for forensic science for our partners and the justice system. Happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay, thanks for that, Vicky. Firstly, can I say that the cold case review team, I'm very pleased with the work that they've been done. It does send out strong messages about the certainty of being caught, even if it takes some time, as technology does move on. And I think there's an old axiom in policing, I understand from an ex-senior police officer, that whatever you do, you leave your dabs somewhere. And forensics will find that in due course. Whether the tech exists now or in the future, they will get there. So I'm going to throw this open to members for questions. Chris and Angela, I've got your hands up. Chris first, then we'll go to Angela.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Vicky, for the report. It's very helpful. Thanks for taking us through those highlights. A couple of areas where I think it might be helpful for you to say a little more. So on slide 13, on post-mortem toxicology, obviously noting there the fact that the team has been able to meet the increasing demand, albeit a consistent output, as you've highlighted, picking up there the issues that you've had around absence in a small team and the impact on output. Obviously, this is an area of considerable high-profile political interest, and I just wondered if there was any more you could say to provide us with assurance around measures in place to ensure that demand is met, and obviously in that instance, both taking account of case management concerns, but also critically the well-being of the staff involved.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for that question. And first of all, I'd just like to say that obviously we recognise the impact that testing timescales in this area on bereaved families and friends. So it's really important that we have that focus in this area. What I would also say is that team within PM postmortem toxicology in Moore Park is very much aligned to that, very much focused on that delivery for families and friends following a death. What I would say is that there is a continued strong collaboration with COPFS and the pathologists in line with the activity, and it's essentially there's very almost routine, really significant engagement with them in terms of making sure that we have prioritise the right cases, and that is optimised as much as possible. We are also looking at internal levers and have taken some of those forward in terms of ensuring that team is well supported, and looking at other activities there to increase the capacity. And as you say, the well-being of the team and all staff across forensic services is of prime importance to us. Maybe bring Paul in from a more detailed perspective if he wishes to add any other points.
Yeah, please, Paul.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair, and to Vicky. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, there's a range of factors in here. Chris, thanks for the question. There's been a number of activities ongoing over the first kind of 6 months of the year that have all contributed to the current picture, and I'll just run through a few of them to give a picture of where post-mortem toxicology is currently at. So the emergence of a new nitazene had an impact earlier in the year. It required some new testing methods and some development work that was required in order to react to that. There was a number of near fatal overdoses and also some drugs deaths and that, and there was a reactive nature to that, which caused a bit of an abstraction in what was really important work with Public Health Scotland and with police colleagues. In addition to that, there has been a number of different areas around the instruments within the laboratory, so essential lab remedial work and also replacement work on workstations with digital division that occurred over a 2-week period and caused a number of abstractions. There's also a lot of ongoing work at the moment in terms of post-mortem tox integration, so there's a lot of staff engagement around the consultation process. So for example, we have moved through the JNCC process and will now move to full consultation on the 21st of August in a group sense, and then individual consultations after that. So there is an element of this that will continue going forward as we bring and fully integrate post-mortem tox staff into SPA Forensic Services. I guess the other element is the demand itself. The demand itself did go up 13% in the first quarter, so we have seen a spike there, and as was touched on, we have seen an extraordinary element of staff abstraction through maternity leave and long-term sick. We've got a total of 4 members of staff off in what is a relatively small team in that regard, so a team of 23 people and just over 20 full-time equivalents. So that has a knock-on effect. And we've also had 1 staff resignation during that period, which has impacted, but we are in the process of remedying that at the moment. What I would say around the inability or that we have been unable to meet that increasing demand, what we have been doing is been extremely active with our engagement with partners, both with the Crown and with NHS and pathologists and everything else. So we are not receiving any challenge there, but that big challenge of the families and ensuring that we are doing this in a timeliest manner remains. So there's a bit of a perfect storm going on in there at the moment, but we're very alive to it, and I'm very active in looking at solutions and easing that pressure on the team and looking after their welfare. I'm in there very regularly to check in on that, both from a managerial and a staff point of view. So acknowledge the question, and hopefully that provides a kind of overview of some of the challenges that we're seeing in that area at this particular time. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. You content with that, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does. Thanks for the very full responses. Obviously, it's not going to get any less challenging in that area, and so I think it's important to surface those things. Chair, I had a couple of other questions, but I can see others with their hands up. I can see others with their hands up and a pressure on time.
So due course, so just carry on and ask what you're asking. Okay, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I had one other question. So referring to pages 14 and 16 and scene attendances, and Vicky, obviously you highlighted improvement action taking place in that area. I guess from our point of view, we would be looking for assurance that the decrease in scene attendances hasn't had any detrimental impact on the quality of evidence gathered, on detection success and so on. And I wonder if you could comment on that. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chris. And yes, as you say, this is absolutely an area of focus for forensic services, working very closely with Police Scotland. Excuse me, and just in terms of the point about quality of evidence from a forensic perspective, we obviously work to standard operating procedures we have and a very full quality management system that provides internally that assurance. But when we look at, I think the question again results focusing on what does that mean for policing, for society. We have done some review of what our trend data shows, so that decrease in for example, group 3 attendances, what does that look like in terms of the crime trends and detection work. So Alistair Patience has been doing some activity around that, and we can't see any correlation there. As I say, I think it's important to understand what opportunities there are to improve in this area, and it can be just as simple as making sure that everyone in the system, from the local policing officers, CID, other national departments, etc., understand the value that we can, from a forensic service perspective, provide at the scene, and make sure that we are asked to attend the right scenes and the triage process therein before attendance is fit for purpose and assures that quality. So I think there's room for improvement in this area, and I don't know if Alistair wishes to add anything further to that response.
Not really a great deal to add, Vicky, to be honest. In terms of total recorded crime, in recent times there's been a decline, and through the short life working group that you alluded to, we've been exploring the reasons for changes in demand and such. So that work is ongoing, and it will take some time to work through that fully, but definitely ongoing and close to our hearts. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. Angela.
Thank you. Just to continue with that, Vicky, I just wonder if there's been any training. I mean, it does look quite dramatic, and as you say, in the north, it's particularly prominent. I suppose I'm just trying to work out how others that might be gathering samples at scenes of crime that are not trained the way that your staff are, and to the standards that you have and the quality standards that you'd adhere to, whether or not there's any training that has been undertaken across wider groups of staff. And I've got one other question on the demand load as well that I'll maybe come back to, Chair.
Please.
Great, thanks, Angela. Thanks for the question. Just in regards to that training, I think there's an opportunity here to engage, particularly when police officers join the force, to really give that overview of what it is that forensic science can do, that value added piece, and the understanding of the things that need to be considered. For example, DNA contamination, making sure chain of custody is appropriate for forensic purposes. There's a lot of documentation there available to our Police Scotland colleagues in regards to how to recover, how to package items or productions for subsequent examination, for example, in the laboratory environment. So we are very, very keen to engage with the right levels across Police Scotland to really reinforce those messages, and I suppose also give them insights as to what may have changed over the last, say, 5-10 years or so, which the officers may not be aware of. So that's a really important aspect for us to really help understand that process. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but if there's any supplementary ones, happy to take that.
Well, I suppose, I mean, I should have said at the outset, the report is really good. I mean, I think the comprehensive nature of the data that you collect and what you then present to the committee gives us huge reassurance in the performance of the service. And I think the transparency with which you do that is to be commended as well. Just on this particular one, I just wonder if there is further data that might subsequently help that improvement agenda that I know that everybody's on, in terms of do we have anything on spoiled evidence and then the impact subsequently on cases that perhaps might not go right through the justice system. But I'll leave that with you. You can think about it. And Chair, I just had one other question that I wanted to ask, and it was the analysis of demand and output and you very ably set out just the variability of that and how it's changing. I just wonder whether or not, or you could expand on how that's managed by the service, that fluctuation, and if the new operating model is going to help to maximise output.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. Yes, absolutely. That demand and fluctuation has been seen over many years across all the different forensic activities, and it's important that internally we work with our partners to understand the prioritisation and any changes within that. Again, links very much into our MOU. Key aspects for me which are important in this area is around our demand forecasting and also strategic workforce planning, which again we had an update at a previous committee in relation to that, which that activity is still on track to provide an internal report on the work of the strategic workforce plan development later next month. So those are obviously key for us internally in terms of understanding the future and being ready for the future and any demands placed upon us. As you say, the operating model has been designed in a way which allows us to have that more flexible resource model. So where we can look at changing demands and what is coming in the future and adapt to better meet that. And again, that's very much driven by our new refreshed forensic services strategy as well. One point I would like, if you don't mind, Chair, to go back to just in relation to Angela, your question about the North and scene attendance. Also just wanted to point out that there are mechanisms in place where we provide training on that initial evidence recovery aspect and some aspects of scene attendance activity to police officers. And these are in remote areas of the N division in the north of the country and also within some areas of the west, which absolutely comply with our training and requirements and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Angela. Katharina.
Chair, thank you. My questions have been largely asked by colleagues and answered as well. I've got a few other ones, but I think I can also cover them under the next agenda item. So I'm okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks very much for that. I'll move us on then, conscious of time, to the next agenda item, which is item 3.3, the Forensic Services Performance Report for Q1. So Vicky, if you can give us a few highlights from that, and then we'll open it up to questions.
That's great, thank you, Chair. Yes, as you say, this is a more up-to-date position, Q1 of performance across the organisation. So performance remains stable, however, there are some areas where we have seen challenges and areas for improvement, as I've mentioned already in the previous agenda item. So slide 3 highlights some key aspects in the executive summary, and the key aspect here that's continuing is the operating model consolidation work, which is continuing with further opportunities to further opportunities for continuous improvement, which are being taken forward. I'll come on to the scene examination aspect again in a bit more detail later, but really the focus just now has been on the volume crime unit, that DNA side of the processing within forensic services, post-mortem toxicology and scene examination. Moving on to slide 4 and the balance scorecard summary. This provides an overview of our business plan for 24-26. It has been reviewed against previous activities which have been closed off, and it now just highlights the top 3 activities within the areas of the balance scorecard. So at this point in time, all are on track and progressing well within the timelines, but is obviously an early part of the stage of the process in terms of being Q1 information. What I would like to point out is that under partners, the delivery of a joint biometric strategy and plan with Police Scotland. I'm pleased to say that there is a paper later on the agenda in this regard, and that has moved on significantly. If I move on to slide 5, which is the business plan compliance, this provides an overview, as I've said before. Apologies that there's a lack of inclusion in the report of a narrative to support this slide, but just to note that significant improvement in the work to implement a modern apprenticeship pathway has been seen, particularly last quarter and quarter 1. Very pleased to see that this is moving on to 2 individuals starting within forensic services in line with the academic year. So thanks in particular to Sam and colleagues within forensic services and Police Scotland in assisting with this. So overall, in terms of the business plan, at this point, there's no significant risks that have been identified at this time, with ongoing progress and prioritisation reviews in place to monitor this on an ongoing basis. If we then move to slides 6 and 7, which provide an update on the performance framework status. These are, of course, activities are aligned with our strategic outcomes. Would like to note that slide 6, on reflection, the year-to-date position there for outcome 1 and the note of RIDORs should actually be green, because there have been no RIDORs reported to the HSE over the last year and this quarter. Also, just to point out the slide 7, the ambers around the performance data are reflected later on in the slide deck. If we then move on to our people, and slide 8, which talks about health and safety, as noted in the Director's report, work is ongoing to improve the management of health and safety across the organisation. We continue to work very closely with Police Scotland Health and Safety and Estates to identify opportunities for continuous improvement, but also there's a lot of activity ongoing at this point in time with regards to the local exhaust ventilation system within the SEC. So Estates and Health and Safety have provided assurance that we will continue to have this as a priority within their activities. Moving on then to slide 9, which shows the establishment figures against the working establishment figure of 602, which we have, again, this is covered later on in the finance paper, so I won't dwell on that further at this point. Slide 10 and slide 11 consider the working days lost and absence. There has been a slight increase in the number of working days lost since the previous quarter. It's around 7%, and the graph to the right hand side of slide 10 gives you just an indication of the categories that are raised as the reasons for absence, and there have been new categories added into the system of reporting, which is a Police Scotland SPA recording system, and these are around the menopause related absence following the introduction of various measures and protocols and toolkits around that area, and also cancer related absence. Slide 11 shows that the long-term absence has seen a slight decrease this quarter, and the short-term absence, long-term absence has seen a slight increase, and short-term absence a slight decrease. And again, you can see there on the right-hand side on the graph a little more information around psychological disorders. This obviously remains a priority of forensic services to understand that and make sure the support mechanisms which are in place are utilised. Slide 12 talks about quality compliance. I've already mentioned the key achievement of the confirmation of UCAS accreditation to the international standard, so I won't dwell on that slide much more due to time pressures. And then the final slides towards the back of the pack really look more on the overview of search and recovery, scenes performance, the laboratory delivery, and then more on the MOU and internal, so I'll dwell a little more on those. In terms of search and recovery scenes, based on the previous conversation and the actions that have been taken, we have seen a slight increase in scene attendance and requests coming in over the last quarter, and this is a positive picture there. So we are looking at that as a positive trend based on the actions that have been taken, which I alluded to previously. With regards to slide 14, this is an overview of the laboratory delivery. So demand remains relatively stable with the output performance showing a decline there. Key to note is that on the right-hand side in the little pie chart does show that the active caseload is increasing and the number of overdue cases has increased slightly from 32% to 36% this quarter. So improvement is required in this area to really improve that timeliness. So processes are in place around that. As I've said previously, there is no risk to statutory time limits not being met, which should hopefully provide assurance with that regard. More detailed information is shown in slide 15 in relation to delivery of the MOU. Importantly, urgent Crown Office and Police Scotland demand continues to be met. This has been the case for many reporting periods, so that's very pleasing indeed. But as has again been reported previously, the P2 priority 2 delivery requests for Police Scotland still remain in a position which is well below our target, and that remains red. As I've said previously, the internal factors which are influencing this performance really are around the volume crime, DNA activity and some other activity around mark enhancement and drugs. As mentioned previously, Operation Portalage has been a significant operation which forensic services have played had a key part to play within that activity, and we are seeing, as Fiona mentioned earlier, an impact on performance, particularly around those more routine casework as shown on slide 15. The final slide, 16, shows our internal performance status. So this is our internal review of our different areas of the business. Within Q1, the green status remains and shows really positive internal performance for search and recovery scenes in relation to timeliness and our targets there, biology, fingerprints, chemistry and documents, drugs driving and criminal toxicology. And there have also been positive improvements seen in firearms, which is pleasing to see there. Areas of focus remain, as I've said previously, around the VCU, DNA activities, drugs and post-mortem toxicology. And with that, I will pause and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for that, Vicky. Can I ask, just looking back on slide 15, priority 2's, it's quite a significant deterioration there, and I see red is there because the issue is in need of attention. So this has clearly had attention from us over the last year because it's been bumping along red quite some time. When can we expect to see an improvement in this? Because this is a 10% reduction, and I get that it's priority 2 and not priority 1, but it's still important.
Yes, absolutely, and I would agree with that. So we recognise that there really is room for improvement in this area, and this is the timeliness is not within an acceptable range there, and that's particularly around the DNA aspects around volume crime. I would say that there's been a lot of change within this area. We also have introduced a process to have direct submission, which again, essentially relies on our scene examination staff, search and recovery scene staff, directly submitting items into forensic services for analysis, which is a positive impact in terms of the demands placed on Police Scotland. But there are some challenges around how we're reporting that, so we know that there's work to be done in this area. I'm hoping that within the next by the next meeting we will have more clarity around the P2 reporting following discussions around our MOU and our performance framework with partners. So I'll pause there, but I don't know if there's Helen is on the call if she wishes to add any more information in this area.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. Thanks, Chair. So, as we've already said, we recognise that the volume crime DNA area isn't within our acceptable range of timeliness. This has been a significant change within the operating model, and the main aim of this is to remodel the service to reduce the time delays in case submission to the lab, increase the resource flexibility, and support a change in processes to become more efficient. Within that, as Vicky alluded to, direct submissions is a fairly big part, in that what we are wanting to do with this particular service is to, where currently the examinations from scene examination, the productions would go back to Police Scotland, they would then have to be worked through the submissions process with Police Scotland and then come into the lab. We're circumventing that by the productions going straight from the scene examination into the laboratory. Obviously, there is a time delay that we have between items going from scene examination to Police Scotland and then through to us. By circumventing that, obviously, we are getting those productions in sooner than we would normally get. So the demand has significantly increased with that change in process. That's a positive change because it means that we are going to be faster and more efficient, but unfortunately it does have a downturn on performance at this point in time. So
Annie, can I just ask, does that mean that
yeah.
the clock starts when it comes into the lab?
In the way that we
For
report
the
these,
performance marker?
absolutely. At the moment, it's when the submission comes into the lab to when the submission completes. So in effect, what we are doing is we are adding in time for the submission to the endpoint. Because we're getting things sooner, we
Yeah.
are then obviously adding to the demand and the resource that's going in very, very quickly into the unit. We didn't anticipate that this was going to be as high a demand as it currently is. And on top of the other changes, that has had significant challenges within that unit.
Right, so that demand should be a constant throughout the year. I mean, it'll go up and down, but the demand is the demand. Shortening the time scale for it getting into the labs means there will be a spike in the labs for a while.
Yes.
Now, my question, you've explained how this has happened. My question was, when is it going to get resolved, and when will we begin to see the figures for turning these around improved?
So the managers within this area are actively reassigning resources at the moment to manage that workflow through the units. The current situation, we do need to do some training within that unit, and that training is ongoing through Q2. So I would anticipate looking at a change and a turnaround in this into Q3, Q4.
Okay, thanks for that. I've got Angela, then Katharina, and then Chris.
Thank you. Sorry. Thanks, Paul. I wanted to ask in particular about, just get to the amber status for performance in relation to strategic outcome 2. I think the detail behind it shows that there's an area of red relating to violent crime unit, and you talk about the changes of moving the team from one site to 2 sites and a delay in the staff training. I just wondered whether or not you could say what actions are being undertaken to bring that back on track, please.
Yes, thanks, Angela. And this is linked to the previous question and the input from Helen around making sure that the training is fit for purpose and it's appropriate, and it can be streamlined as much as possible, but still taking cognizance of the staff who are being trained in a new way of reporting, if you like, that is effective and appropriate from our quality management system perspective. As Helen already said as well, that we are looking at, and there's active reassignment of resources across different areas of that overall biology analysis reporting activity to assist in that area. So it's kind of linked to Paul's question there and the input that Helen provided.
Thank you.
Katharina.
Thank you very much for that. So thank you very much for the report. Really, really good. One thing that has jumped out at me is the gap between the FT within the full operating model and the current establishment figure. I think there's about a 8% difference between where we're saying we need to be from if we were fully staffed to where we actually are just now. And I think the one constant when we talk about improving performance or areas of underperformance is staff availability. I mean, we just rehearsed it again when we were talking about the challenges within postmortem toxicology and how even a small reduction in staff can have an impact on the delivery. So I was just wondering if you could maybe give me a little bit more detail as to whether or not, if we were to fill that, some of the challenges that we're seeing might be reduced. And just generally, I mean, I know again we talked a little bit about some of the really positive developments around modern apprenticeships and the strategic workforce planning, but it just jumped out to me as quite a gap. So a little bit more thought on that, and just explanation as to if we do fill these posts, what is your estimate in terms of improvements in performance?
Yeah, thanks, Katharina. It's a really interesting question there, and I think it's important that within forensic services we have a robust mechanism and process to ensure that we are recruiting any vacancies that we have in the right places. So there are really focused engagements within the SMT on a very regular basis to look at that current position. Through that process, we consider, as you say, what does the future look like? For example, what does performance look like in those areas? And we are reassessing on an ongoing basis where the resource priorities are across forensic services. Because you're absolutely right, it's our scientific and very experienced people that really make the forensic service are aligned with forensic services delivery. So it's important that we have the right people in the right roles going forward and here and now. One of the challenges we have is the timescales for recruitment, which we see within policing in general. For us, it's around about 6 months. So we are actively looking at ways that we can improve that turnaround time. And ensure that we are trying to reduce that as much as possible from the beginning of the process when someone hands in the notice, for example, is retiring or is leaving the organisation. I would say that there's been a significant amount of activity recently because we absolutely have to take cognizance of the financial position. And again, this is covered later on in the finance paper and the agenda. But it's important that we consider the financial position too. So there is very much a push on the recruitment and moving this forward. In terms of timescales of improvement, I would see in terms of some of the areas that we've been talking about today, it will be a number, as I say, number of months, because some of the training timelines are significant in some areas of the business. But see if Fiona's got her hand up if she wants to come in.
Yeah, please, Fiona.
Yeah, just very quickly, Chair Katharina, thank you for the question. There's no doubt that further benefits would be realised from the operating model if we were to recruit to the full FTE that was set out in the business case. So we have seen an impact on the benefits that are being realised through the operating model as a result of the budget that forensic services operates within. So there absolutely would be greater resilience and an improvement in timeliness if we were to recruit to that 652 FTE figure that was in the original business case.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Great, thanks. Did I see Chris's hand up? You wanted to?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yes, I've just got one question. It's on slide 10. It's on absences, working days lost, and Vicky, you touched on this briefly in your introduction. Thank you for the report. Obviously, I'm looking there at the figures. I'm looking at the prominence of psychological disorders. I'm looking at the significant increase in terms of the miscellaneous category. And I just wonder if you could say some more about this. And the extent to which you feel from the data and information you have a sufficiently full understanding of what's happening here, and that understanding and information is enabling you to put in place the right kind of measures to optimize capacity and attendance in the workplace. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chris. It's another really interesting question, and I think from the outset we recognise that roles within forensic services can be difficult. People are exposed to traumatic scenes, information, images, and it's important that from a psychological supervision perspective and a psychological resilience perspective that we support our staff in that area. So there are a number of initiatives that are going on. We have a psychological supervision pilot, which really looks at that early intervention piece. This is at this point in time only aligned to the search and recovery scene attending staff, and we absolutely have the ambition to roll this out further because we see the value in that in terms of giving people support at that early stage and throughout their career. And again, there's ongoing discussions internally with regards to funding for that going forward. On psychological disorders as well, I think we need to also note that from a positive perspective, it's really pleasing to see that people are raising this as the reason for absence and being open about that. Psychological absence can be work related and can be also, of course, non-work related. So it's important that our managers have those positive relationships with their staff to support them through this type of absence and any other type of absence that may be occurring. So we're very, very aligned to the fact that that is a responsibility for line managers to look after their people. That's one of the key elements of the operating model and how we introduced a cohort of first line managers or CTMs into the business to really focus on their people as well, obviously as performance. So that's around psychological supervision or psychological disorders as an absence category. And there's lots of initiatives and programs out there to help our staff, and it's important that our managers, our wellbeing champions and others across the organisation signpost people to the right support in that regard. Miscellaneous, yes, you can see that increase there in terms of the category that is being recorded. We don't have any influence on that because that's up to the individual who's reporting absent from duty to provide that information. So again, we would encourage our staff to report appropriately, so because then we can see real trends there, but there's nothing we can see in terms of that initial review of miscellaneous category at this point in time.
Okay. You continue with that, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I guess it's, I understand what you're saying about both psychological disorders and the miscellaneous category. I guess the emphasis you placed on the quality of engagement with staff is what will provide you with the kind of qualitative understanding of what these high-level statistics show us. And so, it's helpful to hear that that is happening, and that you feel that is contributing to you putting the right kind of measures in place. That seems to be the kind of golden thread there that's really critical. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Vicky. I'm going to move the business on then. So item 3.4 is the drug driving update, and we have, 3.4, Paul Stewart introducing that. So Paul, if you can take us through this. We've got another report in the pilot, so we'll probably be talking in a lot more depth about things at that stage as well. So over to you, Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, like other papers, I'll take as read, but I will run through now just to pick out a couple of key points. On demand, you will see that the Q1 average submission rate has remained broadly consistent with the last quarter last year at 318, which is 144 cases above the maximum internal capacity. But I'll say a little bit more on that as we move through the report, because we've used increased outsourcing to manage the increase, but we have also increased our internal output due to a number of different factors. So there's been a bit of flexibility applied there, which will come into play later on in the financial year. In terms of capacity, you will see that our internal output was 264 averaged over the quarter, so I'm pleased with that level of performance, and the team are doing well to maintain that level of internal output. Outsourced partners are continuing to provide that support with the average combined output of 298 over the quarter. So the internal caseload, as I've said, remains in a strong position as highlighted in the open caseload graph. And it's pleasing to report that there are no cases at risk of time bar due to the laboratory delays or any delays in the laboratory. In terms of the outsourcing, we are experiencing that ongoing risk associated with it being a single supplier. However, engagement with that supplier remains really positive and consistent, and we've got assurance that the level of outsourcing can be provided against our requirements up to 100 per month, and as we move through the year there is increased capacity to increase that as required. So
hang on, can I just pick you up on that?
Yeah.
There, what do you mean by that? By the increased risk of the monopoly supplier? What's going down there?
So it's not an increased risk, it's just an ongoing risk, Chair, that we have identified that we only have that single supplier from an external perspective. So
are we having problems with them because of that, is where I'm coming from at the moment?
No,
okay,
not at all. No, not at all.
So I'm just a wee bit sensitive about that from our experiences in the past.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no problem. In terms of our performance, the rolling average of 95% performance been met in quarter one. Been met with quarter one showing a 99.67% for Section 5A cases, and all Section 4 cases, 3% of our overall caseload met the 90-day target over Q1 as well. So I'm just going to touch on the talks development plan. I spoke earlier about the flexibility and the internal output as well as the requirement to outsource. So the talks development plan, we have a bit of a delay in the introduction of new instruments, the QTOF, which is a quantitative time of flight, due to a kind of unpredicted element of requirement for a software upgrade, and also the pressures on digital division within Police Scotland. But we're working very closely with them to minimise the delay and to get that plan of action going forward. So there's also been a requirement for a capital spend in that regard, just with regards to the software upgrade that's required. Panel B work due for implementation in Q3 and is on schedule, and that work relates to Section 4 efficiencies, and the direct replacement of an alcohol instrument is on the stocks as well, and that will require some development and validation work, but that is all on schedule to continue. In terms of the 6-month timeline, you will see that the percentage of cases delivered within the 120 days from the date of incident to case report is shown in the graph at the top of page 7, and performance associated with the first 28 days is highlighted in the second graph, so that highlights the areas of performance in that regard. You will note that 2 Section 4 cases have been rejected due to late submission, and we have rejected them with regards to the 6-month timeline and against the performance measures within the MOU. That equates to 0.1% of the drug driving cases submitted over the period, and you'll see that a further 3 have undergone reduced analysis within Q1 for the same reason, that late submission, and we have implemented the performance measures within the MOU and the long-term, the 6-month timeline. In terms of the long-term sustainable model, I know that there's already been a question on that today as well. That remains subject to monthly meetings with all the internal partners, and there are some challenges already being articulated around the states and the ongoing discussions to resolve that. So there is a paper in the drug driving pilot, so I won't provide any more commentary on that, and there's recognition that the development of the full business case, funding discussions and subsequent approval will take several years to materialise into tangible outputs for SPA Forensic Services. So I'll pause there, Chair, and happy to take any questions. I realise there's a fair bit in there.
Yeah, no, it's a fairly substantial report. Can I firstly ask about the graph on, where are we? Sort of scroll down, which is rookie error. Yes, the graph demand versus output on page 3 of the report. And outsourced output seems to have substantially gone down in May and June. What's the story behind this? Are they turning things around better, or is this reduced demand, or what? So can you give us a bit of an explanation for that?
Yeah, I certainly can. We've had a bit of I mentioned a perfect storm in post-mortem toxicology around the challenges that we're having. We've had the perfect storm the other way in criminal toxicology. So by that, and to contextualise that, we haven't had staff extraction because of the delay in the QTOF. So the development work that's required for that and the 6-month delay has not been undertaken. Therefore, we've got more staff to utilise and to direct towards some of the internal capacity to process the cases. So that's been ongoing. So we've been working with all of our staff within criminal toxicology focused on casework. And that has led to a reduction, well, it's led to an increase in the internal output and a decrease on the requirement for us to outsource to our external partner. The flip of that will happen when we get the QTOF back online and we get the development work and the validation work that's required for that, because then we will see a higher level of abstraction and a requirement to increase the outsourcing element. So I'm anticipating across the 12-month period that we will see that flexibility and that flexible approach applied that will increase our spend, for example, and our requirement for outsourcing in August, September, October, when we start the work on the development work on the QTOF. So it's just a bit of flexibility being applied across the process, and I see that very much as a positive in the ability for us to adapt in that regard.
Yeah, I see Mr. Naylor's hand up, so maybe bring you in at this moment, Craig.
Thanks, Chair. For 3 points. One, I'm really pleased to see the significant rise in the internal capacity within SPA Forensics to deal with drug driving. Over the last 2 or 3 years, there have been massive efforts to change that, and we're now averaging 264 cases a year when we were struggling to achieve 100 2 or 3 years ago. That is fantastic. It's really pleasing to see. I'll echo the comments that I think you were making earlier on, Chair, around nervousness about a single supplier for outsourcing, and the fact that they are meeting our demands just now is fantastic, but we have had experience in recent years where they've not been able to do that in a timely manner. That's fantastic. The one bit that I would maybe just ask a question about, and I suppose it's more a question for Police Scotland colleagues, is the graph at 2.24, which shows the delivery of samples within the 28-day MOU agreement. We're sitting with 94%. Now, going back a number of years, we don't really know what that number was, but 94% of cases arriving at the lab within 28-day stretch target. In some areas, people would say that is a really good figure, but when you look at over 6 months, that's 127 cases that have not been delivered from the place of the sample being taken in a custody suite to forensic science. 28 days seems quite a long period of time for a blood sample to go from even Shetland to a lab in the central belt of Scotland. And I suppose I'm asking a question, is that an acceptable level of performance? If it is an acceptable level of performance, that's fine, I'll shut up and go away. But I'm not sure if 127 cases putting the system in pressure to get the analysis done quickly enough, the report written quickly enough, and then a case submitted to COPFS is really where we want to be. So I suppose, Chair, it's a question for the committee as to whether that's an acceptable level of performance. Thank you.
Right. Do we have anyone from Police Scotland that's able to respond to this?
Hello, Chair. Chief Superintendent Hilary Sloan here. Hello.
Okay.
So I'll provide a bit of context in relation to that. So clearly 94% is good, but 100% is better. So clearly there is still work to be done in the regard of making sure that we're getting submissions to the right place at the right time within the timescales We regularly have engagement with local policing divisions. I engage with local policing commanders around the performance that we're getting through forensic services and the Operation Hitch ongoing meetings. So they are well cited on the requirement to submit the samples timeously, but clearly there will be, unfortunately, an element of human error, which we are trying very hard to eradicate, and that involves training to those particular individuals so that they have an understanding of why they're being asked to submit the samples in the timescales that they are. It's a work in progress, Chair. We are trying really hard to get to that definitive 100%, but there will always probably be a wee bit of human error that we need to take account of.
So just to get this right in my head, the police officers that are taking these samples are always traffic police?
So not necessarily. So road policing officers are trained in it. So what will happen is if a local policing officer stops an individual where they think there's a requirement to utilise a drug wipe, they will call on the services of the road policing officer, who will then perform that role. And then it will be for the local policing officer to submit the drug wipe. So it's obviously providing that education to them at the roadside by the road policing officer to ensure that they're aware that it needs to be submitted within the timescales. There's issues sometimes as well you've articulated about them coming from very far away within Scotland. It's getting them from one part of the country to a different part of the country, and it has worked very well within Shetland, but sometimes there appear to still be some issues with getting the samples to where they need to be.
Right, but Shetland isn't 4% of the samples. We're talking 1 in 20 samples is more than 1 in 20 samples are late, and within what's it, 2 weeks, they have to be in to the labs. I would have thought, you're saying 94% is good. It's not really. It's 1 in 20 samples that's not arriving within a fortnight, and I would have thought this is a routine procedure. This is what you do when you take a sample. You don't stick it in a lab for a fortnight, in a fridge for a fortnight. It should be straight out the door as quickly as possible. I mean, presumably there's someone that goes around and collects these, or a courier service or something.
Yes, that's correct. There will be individuals who will come and pick the samples up and take them to where they need to be.
Yeah, 1 in 20 samples not being submitted in time gives me the impression you're not taking this seriously as an issue. That's where I'm coming from, and I think that's where Mr. Naylor's coming from as well. Angela, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Paul. It wasn't necessarily on that point, it was just a couple of other questions, so I'm happy to wait till later if that's...
No, I mean, unless...
Okay. Can I just ask a couple of questions? I know we'll go into this in paper 4 in a good bit more detail, but just on this particular one, the performance has been really good by the internal team, so that's to be commended. I just wonder how sustainable that is given the delays that have been flagged up in Fiona's report and in this one. And the final thing that I wanted to ask was the 166, the additional cost because of outsourcing. I've lost the bit now. I just wondered how that was going to be met, if that could be explained, please.
Okay. Anyone can respond to that?
Yeah, Chair, I can take the question on the maintaining that level of performance. It's something that we know over a long period of time the organisation has been under scrutiny and pressure to deliver against the drug driving and the cases that are continually rising in that regard. So in terms of the internal processes and the internal management of that, myself and the senior managers within the criminal toxicology area are in regular engagement and constantly monitoring the well-being of staff and providing support as and when required. What I would say is that the staff are in a really good position. They are really content and really buoyed by the fact that they are producing in the way in which they are, and we are continually monitoring that and supporting them to continue on that journey. So that I see that as a good news story, and I also see it as something that we will continue to monitor and review. But the staff are in a good place at this particular moment in time.
Okay. Fiona.
Yeah, can I just add to that in relation to the cost pressure, Angela, in that the 166, we are within our budget at the moment able to account for that within the forensics budget as a result of underspending staff costs, which we're seeing. But clearly it is a pressure, and the spend that we've got on the additional outsourcing is preventing other activity from being able to be progressed. In relation to that, can I also just come back to your point, Chair, in relation to this sample submission? So through the Operation Hitch working group, we are working consistently hard with Police Scotland to look at the transit of samples into the laboratory. We've got some really good, clear management information, and Police Scotland are working really hard across each of the divisions to use that information to drive improvement. So there is an awful lot of work that is ongoing within Police Scotland to improve the sample submission rates, and it is quite pinpointed and specific based on the information which we're able to provide.
Right, so is it the wipes that are going to the lab or blood samples?
It's blood samples that are submitted to the laboratory. So the roadside test is carried out. That gives an indication of drugs present. And then within custody, the sample is taken by NHS staff, which is they recover the blood sample, and it's the blood sample that is sent into the laboratory. So
who's taking that? Is that a doctor or?
It'll be a doctor or a nurse that's appropriately trained that would provide that sample in custody.
Yeah, and that gets labelled, and that goes where then? Is that handed to a police officer?
So it's the police officer's responsibility to appropriately deal with that sample, which includes obviously the documentation chain of custody around that. There are different mechanisms for the transit of samples in different parts of the country. So sometimes those samples are sent directly into the laboratory, and in other areas they're delivered to the closest forensic services laboratory, and then we would transfer that sample through our internal logistics solution. So it's not a one size fits all across the country. We've certainly been discussing that within the Operation Hitch meetings as well, in terms of how could we look at making that a consistent process so that we can again start to see improvement. Actually, through the Shetland pilot, it was interesting that we did see good standards of compliance in terms of the transit of the samples into the laboratory. So actually some of the areas we need to dig into what specifically is causing some of those samples to be delayed. And there is a lot of ongoing, very specific work within Police Scotland, as Hilary referred to there, in terms of training of officers so that they understand the importance of getting the samples into the laboratory quickly. More work to do, but a lot of focus in that space.
Yes, and how big an impact is geography on this?
I don't think it's particularly the biggest impact, actually, because in Shetland we see great compliance, and that's probably the furthest away from the laboratory that we have, with the challenges of being an island community. So I don't think it's geography that's necessarily the issue. I think it comes down to individual officer training and making sure that there's an understanding of the importance of the swift transit of samples to the laboratory.
Yeah, it's just, where I'm coming from is if we've engaged a doctor or a nurse to take the sample, then it just sits in a fridge, and that's just not good enough. And it then backs up on our staff as well. I have to say, hats off to the internal performance, because that is significantly improved. So congratulations to our staff on turning these about. But anything we can do to ease the pressure on them for these, I think, would be welcome. Anyway, I've kind of flogged that one enough at the moment. Do we have any other comments or questions on this? And I'll move the business on. We've still got another paper to come, which I think there's a number of questions about to be raised. Okay, I'll move the business on if that's okay. That moves us then on to where are we? Item 3.5, the Forensic Services final financial monitoring report. So that's 3.5. That's Fiona Douglas again. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I've touched on a few elements of this as we've gone through the discussions today, so I'll be brief. So the Q1 net expenditure forecast is showing a potential overspend of 0.1 million, which is as near as to a balanced budget at the current position in the year. So that's reassuring in terms of the overall budget position. We do have some underspends in pay costs at the moment, which again is allowing us to deal with the pressure around the increased outsourcing for the higher than anticipated level of demand for drug driving. The lower pay spend reflects a gap between FTE actuals and the budgeted figure. We are forecasting that will close. We are on top of the recruitment, as Vicky referred to within the performance report, so we will not have that flexibility as the year progresses, and it's really important that we're recruiting the right roles into the organisation as we reach our budgeted head count. The capital position, well, we've got a capital budget of 2.7 million this year at the moment. There are no risks around the spend in that area. There are plans in place to ensure that the capital allocation is spent, and we're engaged with procurement colleagues on particularly large purchases around the replacement of some of our DNA robotics process as a large proportion of that capital spend. But I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, on any other element of the report.
Okay, any other questions on this? We touched on the drug driving outsourcing. Angela?
So it was related to my last question, Chair. I just wonder, Fiona, at some point whether we might get an update on the consequence of the investment in the outsourcing and what that might mean in terms of delayed investment in other areas. Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, did you asked when we'd get a, did you say when, Angela, or?
I just said at some point it would be useful to know the impact of the increased sum that has to be spent on the outsourcing and what it means in terms of you know, where are we not investing basically, and what's the implication for the service.
Well, that's fine. I thought you'd asked when, and we hadn't got a date. So. Right. Okay, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Fiona. And I think you anticipated this question in your remarks, but I just wondered if you could say anything more about your level of confidence in terms of the deliverability of projects in the capital spend area, given some way into the financial year. This is always a challenge. So just anything more you can say to assure us about your level of confidence in that respect would be appreciated.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and I'm very conscious of the fact that we were underspent against the capital budget in last financial year. So we have strengthened our internal processes around the management of capital projects. A good proportion of that 2.7 million relates to one particular purchase, which replaces the last part of the DNA process. The invitation to tender should be issued within a matter of weeks in relation to that. So we've got a good grip internally around each of the capital projects that are to be delivered, and we've got good support from our Police Scotland procurement colleagues in the delivery of that. So I have a high level of confidence in relation to delivery of the capital spends against the budget that's been provided.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. If we've no other questions on this, I'm going to move us on to, oh, hang on, Paul, have you wanted to come in? Oh no, I'm seeing a wee note here. Right, I'm going to move the business on to the next item, which is item 4, the drug driving pilot. And we have Chief Superintendent Sloan in attendance for that. So if you'll introduce that report, Chief Superintendent, be most grateful.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning again, folks. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come in and speak to you about this paper. What I would say before I go through it in a wee bit more detail is that this has been pulled together to provide members an idea of where we're hoping to go in relation to drug wipes from a Police Scotland perspective. We work really closely with Fiona and Paul and their teams, as they've already outlined, just to make sure that we're getting this in the absolutely spot on way it should be. This is an indicative plan of where we are heading. It is not a final draft, but it was just really to give members an opportunity to see what our thinking is in conjunction with forensic services. So you'll see at the point in the 3.7 that there is a caveat that the idea of the rollout has not been through the Force Executive as yet, and that plan of rollout may change because we've just asked for some analytical work to be done in relation to that. So it's just an idea of where we think the rollout could go. What I would say as well is it's really important that that transparency is there so that you can see what we're trying to do, so that that collaborative effort can be done together, and that's really the ethos and purpose of this report. So I'll maybe just go into it in a wee bit more detail, taking it as read, of course, but you'll see obviously with the Festive Drink Drug Drive campaign, we decided to simultaneously launch the pilot in Shetland in conjunction with Forensic Services, and that has continued through the Drink Drug Drive campaign in June, July, and the Drug Week, which is coming up very soon within August. We've been evaluating it as we go. And as you can see at 2.1, the key findings to date are that there has been 30 wipes used with 15 positive and 14 negative. The reason for the slight discrepancy there is that one of the wipes was inconclusive and required the use of a second wipe, which then provided a negative reading. So you'll see that that is a positivity rate of 52% in Shetland at the minute, which is just very slightly below the force positivity rate of 56%. In relation to the detections, you'll see, interestingly enough, 40% of them involved female drivers, which is very different to that nationally. So there is some analytical work to look into that to really understand why that is the case. All of the 15 detections were residents within Shetland. One offending behaviour was a repeat offence for that individual. All of the evidential samples met that 14-day submission, and obviously Fiona's already articulated that geography wasn't an issue in that regard, and the feedback from the officers has been really supportive, as has that of the local community. So in relation to the next steps, obviously we're using the evaluation from Shetland to help inform us going forward, but we have developed a short life working group under the banner of Operation Seltern, which involves key partners around the table to really understand what that evaluation is telling us and what next steps are going to look like. And it's obviously that incremental increase in local policing officers having the ability to use the drug wipes, and it clearly will require careful management between ourselves, Forensic Services, NHS and the Crown in that regard. So obviously we need to identify the officers in the first place to undertake that training. And then that training will be provided by officers from Learning and Training Development from Tullyallen. We obviously need to engage with NHS and Force medical examiners and make sure that COPFS are cited on the work that we are doing, and clearly a communication strategy would be key to that as well, to make sure internally and externally people are cited and partners are cited on what the plan is. So I've spoken about 3.7, the table there already. So you'll see, as I said, it's just an indicative idea of where we think we could do the rollout, taking cognizance of any evaluations that we would be doing after the pilot in the areas of A, U and N divisions, which we're hoping to start in October. And you'll see there as well the monthly costs in relation to that. I think there might have been a further update in relation to that cost implication from outsourcing. And you'll probably note as well that K division is not in your table, and apologies for that. It was an omission. So that has been included now. But what I would say is, obviously, we are working really, really closely with forensic services and other partners just to make sure that that is the correct order in which to roll out the drug wipes, and that work will continue just to ensure from an analytical perspective that we're targeting the right areas within the force. Obviously, we've spoken already about local policing officers having that extra ability to do the submissions, and it is a work in progress around training them in the submissions of the samples that they're obtaining as well, and that work will absolutely continue through the Operation Hitch groups and through interaction with local policing supervisors as well as my peers as divisional commanders. But obviously it's clear that there will be a significant financial implication in relation to the rollout, as you can see there, given the numbers and the suggestion of the costings that it would have. Just in relation to point 5, Chair, there was an action around drug driving and communications that came from the last meeting. So point 5 just really highlights the communications that are ongoing between ourselves and various partners. Obviously, you'll see there we have that annual calendar of road safety that we share with partners right across Scotland, and it is prepared in conjunction with them, along with colleagues from England and Wales, to almost mirror, where possible, the NPCC calendar of events as well. We have analytical products that we're having done before, during and after every campaign as well, which are shared with colleagues within Transport Scotland and Road Safety Scotland that will help inform future campaigns. We have a social media communications team who proactively share campaigns and the results of those with our partners so that they can share with their platforms as well. We have a dedicated page on the Force website now, which links again to Road Safety Scotland, just around the work that we're doing collaboratively there. We discuss drug driving routinely at the Road Safety Governance Performance Board, which is chaired by now ACC Alan Waddell, which is attended by representatives from right across the force. And as I've mentioned already, that short life working group for Operation Seltern, where we have key partners around the table now, including SPA Forensic Services, COPFS, NHS and Road Safety Scotland. And obviously, once the drug week is concluded in August, we will have an updated evaluation of the Shetland pilot, just to provide any update with regards to the submissions that may possibly be added to from those figures that I've given you today. So hopefully that gives you an overview, and quite happy to take any questions, Chair, as you see fit. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Mr. Neil, are you wanting to come in at this point?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Hilary, for the explanation of the paper. I'm maybe a wee bit confused because you're talking about bits in the paper that don't seem to be in the published paper. So I don't have a 3.7 in my paper. So forgive me, but I'll go from the one that was published on the SPA website. I'm really pleased that there is an ambition within Police Scotland to increase this, and I'm really keen that this is done in a way that it doesn't affect the progress that's been made around blood sample testing from the SPA forensics. But I've got a number of concerns that I'd like to maybe just raise. My first concern is that this is looking like a 400 case per month increase at the conclusion of the rollout, and all of that is to be delivered through an outsourced capability. that cost per annum, I think in the paper, is looking like something like £1.5 million from 27 onwards, with a rolling incremental increase of £100,000 in this financial year, £935,000 in 26-27. And I'm just wondering, you said this hasn't been through the executive, but has this been through any budget process to secure that funding? So that's point one. I'm also aware that Mr. McGowan is sitting here from the COPFS, and I'm not sure how much sighting both he and the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service will have, or had consideration of an increase of 400 cases per month coming through to them for prosecution and case management time. But it's maybe something for others to have a look at. And then finally, I suppose the outsourcing argument is one that we have discussed already at this meeting and many meetings before, in that we are sitting with a monopoly supplier, we are sitting with a lack of capacity in the marketplace. And if we see an uptick from either the Metropolitan Police or any of the biggies down south, like the Met or Merseyside, of a use of the capability, then are we going to be sitting at the back of a queue and not be able to get the samples that we are investing, lots of money, time and effort into gathering, analysed in a way that we would want to within 6 months' time limit? So I know there's a lot of points there, Hilary, but you can understand my concern that this needs to be really carefully managed so that we don't get into a position we were in 3 years ago. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Naylor. All your points are noted. I might maybe ask if Fiona would like maybe to come in relation to the budget question there that you've asked. COPFS have been involved in the conversations around this through Operation Cellturn. So I'm hoping that the representative on the committee today is aware of that. And obviously the outsourcing is an issue. We've been involved with Fiona and the team in the pulling together of the full business case relative to forensic services and the capacity going forward. And we continue to do that collaboration with them just around that and the demand that we are trying to predict. So part of this work is to try and better understand what the demand is going to look like. And that's why it's really important that once we do the incremental rollout in A and U divisions, for example, that we then evaluate that just to see if what we think the figures are going to look like are actually coming to fruition. So if Fiona, if you don't mind maybe coming in with regards to the budget piece, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hilary, and thank you, Craig. There is a placeholder in the budget discussions in relation to additional outsourcing funding that may be required next financial year in relation to an incremental rollout of the roadside testing. I think that the paper's helpful in setting out what Police Scotland's ambition could be, and I think there's a need to finalise what that looks like in terms of additional outsourcing for a rollout for next financial year. So we had some discussions around the budget with the Chief Constable yesterday. Those will continue before the budget submission is provided to Scottish Government, and that will include a funding ask in terms of additional outsourcing for next year based on what a finalised incremental rollout plan might look like.
Are you content with those responses, Craig?
Thank you. Yes, but I still think there's a risk there that there's additional money this year when budgets are tight. Fiona's already said they're tracking online, but an extra £100,000 of outsourcing this year will be a challenge when we were running hot in terms of the samples that are going through. I suppose the other bit was the wider question for Stephen and colleagues as to the capacity that they could take on that level of demand. Thank you.
Can I ask, before I get Angela in, I see that Police Scotland seem to be commissioning Eurofins directly and bypassing forensics. Am I reading this wrongly? And incidentally, I don't have a 3.7 in my report either. So am I reading that correctly, or yeah, can you perhaps?
So with reference to 3.7, apologies, 3.7 is in effect the table that outlines the incremental rollout with the different divisions and the timescales for that. That's what I was referring to.
Okay.
So So with reference to your other point, clearly we will be working in collaboration with Fiona around that, just to understand what that's going to look like going forward. And sorry, Chair, do you want to come in?
No, carry on.
And that's the whole point of having the operation cell turn and working together to really understand what the demand is going to look like and how we're going to manage it going forward.
Okay, it's so there's no question of you sending samples directly to Eurofins. They will still be channeled through forensics.
So for me, that relationship that Fiona has with a third party organisation is the way I would expect it to happen, but I don't have the in-depth knowledge to know what way that would actually work. But for me, that relationship that Fiona and the team have with Eurofins would be something that I would expect would continue.
Yeah, it's just that when we're talking about the Westminster report, part of the thing they said the strength of the Scottish system was that forensics and policing were kept apart. And if you're sending samples direct to Eurofins, not via forensics, it kind of blows that apart a bit. And that's not something I think that I would be content to see.
No, I don't anticipate that would be the way it would work, Chair, but I don't have the in-depth knowledge in relation to it. But for me, the relationship that Fiona and the team has with Eurofins should be maintained, and Police Scotland would be to the side of that relationship. I don't think that would be something that I would anticipate would change with this incremental rollout.
Yeah, no, it's a pretty fundamental part of the way we do our business is that separation. And yeah, I think that does need to be clarified. I think there's a lot of aspects of this report that need an awful lot more work. But seeing a number of hands, I've got Angela, but I'm going to bring in the Crown Office, if that's okay. Stephen McGowan first. So Stephen, if you want to come in at this point.
Hi, just to answer the points on capacity, the numbers spoken about cause no concern at all in terms of capacity of us and the system to deal with them. The dependency, though, is in relation to sticking to the timescales that have been in place for the last few years. If those timescales are not adhered to, then that's what will create the issue. That's obviously something that's part of the ongoing discussion, but the broad numbers are not something which cause any difficulty in terms of the caseloads that we have in the summary courts already.
Thanks for that. Angela, Paul, you wanted to come in on this point, or is it something
Yes,
else?
Chair. Yes,
I'll bring
Chair,
you in
no,
first, Paul, if that's okay, Angela. Yeah, okay, carry on.
Yeah, it was more specifically on the outsourcing and the process within the that we just discussed there. So the process will still be managed and outsourced through forensic services. So we will still have site and you know, the agreed process through Opselton is that the samples will still be submitted to us, and we will internally manage the outsourcing on behalf of Police Scotland in that regard. So if that provides a bit of clarity around that.
Okay, Angela.
So it was similar to that, but just to reinforce that, I do think given the work that Fiona and the team, wider team do in terms of their standards, their accreditation, and also the data and intelligence that they collect that is really useful, certainly for the committee, and I'm sure in developing future plans and strategies. Making sure that forensics are, you know, at the heart of this is really important, and but that gives the committee a lot more assurance. Some of these discussions. My point was, though, the cost or the outsourcing element. Given the total value of that, is this something that will then be presented to resources in due course?
Can anyone give me an answer to that? Oh, Fiona, you got your hand up?
I do have my hand up on a different point, but I think that's a question for Police Scotland colleagues in relation to the presentation to resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as I've said, Chair, this has been seen by the executive but not endorsed by. So there would be a requirement to go through a governance process, and You've alluded to it already, and I said at the start, this is a first draft of a paper to give you an idea of what we're thinking. It's not the final draft. There's a lot of work that still requires to be done, as you've articulated there, Chair, and we were really keen to just give you a view of where we were heading and what we were thinking in relation to it. But there is a lot of work to be done, and it will require to go through the relevant governance processes as you've suggested there.
Thank you. And could I ask that we have the updated report circulated, please?
If we can do that as an action, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. I did ask yesterday, but I was told that it was too late because the report had already been published, so that's why it wasn't shared at that juncture.
Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go back to your earlier comments there, Angela, as you were asking questions around the need for us to make sure that we don't lose intelligence as we go through the incremental rollout and the role of forensic services within that. And thank you, Paul, for confirming that through the Ops-Elton discussions, forensic services will continue to play our part in relation to outsourcing review of the results. There's also an important assurance role that forensic services plays as we're effectively subcontracting work to another organisation that through our own internal management system we would audit and ensure that the standards of work that are provided from any external organisation would be met, albeit Eurofins as the organisation which we're talking about here are fully accredited in this space, so they would meet the same quality standards that forensic services would. So I just wanted to make that point, but I think it also, I think it's everybody is on the same page in terms of wanting to tackle the problem of drug driving on the roads of Scotland, and forensic services is hugely supportive of the need to roll out the roadside testing further to local policing officers, and it's really about how do we deliver a long-term sustainable model for the delivery of this analysis, and we need to push on with the work on the business case really to build this capacity in Scotland. So that we're able to respond to Police Scotland's needs, and whilst the pilots and an incremental rollout will provide additional information in relation to future demand, the paper indicates that, you know, with a limited rollout of training a number of local policing officers in each of the divisions, which is illustratively set out, I think, really well within the paper. It shows that there is going to be that substantial increase in demand, which is set out within the initial business case that was discussed at Resources Committee. So I think we really need to keep the focus on building the long-term sustainable model, accepting that there is a period between now and then where I think we have that shared ambition to want to do more than we're able to just now, and it's really working together to make sure we do that in a controlled way that's affordable, and we need to make sure that the budget submissions are clear.
Yeah, I think what you've said, you articulated exactly where the members of the committee stand on this. I think we do want to ramp this up, but it has to be done in a carefully planned fashion so we don't end up with time-barred cases again. And you're right, this is a hideous problem that's the blight of Scotland, and the more we can do to get people that are taking drugs off the road, the better, I think. On that point, can I ask about the actual pilot itself? There's 3 wipes issued to officers, I understand. Was that, is there a reason for limiting that?
No. So in essence, we set aside a certain number of drug wipes, but they basically have an expiry. So what we need to do is really manage the numbers of wipes that we have to make sure that they're in the right places. So in essence, there is no limit on the number that officers can use at any particular time. But what we then need to do is move them about the country to make sure that if there is an expiry date coming up, that it's being managed appropriately. But no, there was no limit on officers utilising the wipes during the pilot or elsewhere by road policing officers.
Does anyone know how much these wipes cost?
Roughly, Chair, about £17.
Per wipe? Yeah. Okay. And presumably traffic police have a stock of these in the car.
So we have a stock that we manage countrywide, basically for the road policing officers. So they're not kept in the vehicles, but they are within the offices so that the officers can utilise them as and when.
Okay. Do we have any other questions on this? It wasn't apparent in the report that this was still very much, an early report with a view to it being fleshed out. So I'm pleased to hear that we're going to get more on this. I think we were only invited to discuss the contents of this, which I think we've done. And maybe if we can get a future report, was again, what also isn't apparent in the report is the fact that it's not been to the Force Executive yet. So it'll be interesting to get their take on things. I think there are some unintended consequences in this that we need to nail down, not least the budgetary side and the constitutional side of it. So if we can get that all sorted out in due course when this comes back in its next guise, I think that would be most welcome. So if we're content with that, I'll move the business on to the next item, which is item 5, HMICS review of forensics toxicology. So that's Paul Stewart again.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be.
Sorry, can I just say 1 second?
Yep.
I understand, Hilary, this is your last meeting, so thank you very much, because I understand you're retiring shortly. So Littlebird has just mentioned it to my ear. So thanks very much for your contribution and your work in this area. And can I wish you all the best going forward?
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Paul, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. So the HMICS assurance review, again, taking the paper as having been read, you will see that there's an increase in 2 recommendations have been closed in the last quarter. That's rising from 12 to 14. I do have a correction for the paper. I have said 9 recommendations in the paper remain live. There's actually 11 remain live and not the 9 indicated, and that's my basic arithmetic letting me down there, Chair. So, so we do still have 11 outstanding. Focused activity on these actions and recommendations remain ongoing with Police Service of Scotland colleagues, and we're looking to move the recommendations forward to closure in a timeous manner. I'm also engaging with members of HMICS on the direction of travel with some of the recommendations in order that we can do work that adds value and looks to aid the closing of the recommendations. So indeed, we've got a meeting of that tomorrow with police colleagues. So we're looking to move this forward, and I'll just pause there, Chair, and take any questions on it.
Okay, do we have any questions on this from board members? Just bear with me a second.
Paul, could I?
Yeah, oh, sorry, Angela. Forgot to check the screen.
Just a quick one. Could I just check on the Amber recommendation in the Appendix 10? Well, it's number 10. I don't think we've really had an update on this since, well, as it says, December 24. I just wondered, where has this got to, and can we take any assurance that things are progressing?
So yes, Angela, I can take that. Joanne Tierney and Helen are on the call in terms of the core operating system. This recommendation relates to the work on the core operating system, which is ongoing. There's a project board set up for that, and there is work ongoing around the core operating system and when and how that will be introduced across forensic services. And I see that Joanne has put her hand up and may be able to say a wee bit more about that, Chair.
Yeah, please.
Yes, so when we move on to the next agenda item, I'll be able to talk through the timeline for the revised replan of the timeline for the FS cause development, but we're working closely with our colleagues to make sure that requirements are all covered in place specifically for the criminal toxicology and aligned to the work that's ongoing in the long-term sustainable model as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I am concerned at the number of, I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 target dates that seem to have been passed and we don't have new dates for. We get a commitment to get something in there.
Yes, Chair, that's part of our discussions tomorrow, is to look at a realistic date for completing some of the recommendations.
Maybe once you've done those discussions, circulate that around board members. So, because it's, I think, a good 3 months till our next meeting. And it'd be quite nice if that could be one of the actions, that would be helpful.
Yes, can do, Chair. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? No? Grand. Move us then on to item 6, which is the Forensic Services Change Programme.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'll take the paper as read, but keen to pull out just a few high-level updates for the committee. The overall programme status at the moment is amber. This is due to some delays in the long-term sustainable model project and some delays in the FS cause data migration project, for which we have now submitted a timeline replan for consideration by the committee. In terms of the long-term sustainable model, highlights significant progress has been made internally within the project team around setting up the resource, dedicating resource to that, and allocation of work packages and work stream owners. However, resource prioritizations discussions continue to be ongoing with Police Scotland colleagues, particularly in the provision of estate support for the project. We are grateful for the digital division support, which has already been committed to. Once discussions around the availability of partner resource, we'll then be able to finalise the project plan and bring that back through the project governance, both internally with Forensic Services and to this committee. In terms of the FS cause and data migration, the project is tracking red against the original delivery timeline as in the programme plan, but as I've referenced, we do include an updated version of a timeline which would see our full business case for this project beginning the approvals process into this time next year. As looking for a contract award to be confirmed in October of 2026. So we have the reason behind this delay for the FS cause data migration is around the revised approach to procurement. So having had further discussions with both our digital division colleagues and our procurement colleagues, we have been advised that a non-specific approach in terms of either a cloud or on-premise solution will give us the best chance of making sure that we're fully engaging across the market. We are all committed, obviously within Forensic Services and our partners, to making sure we get the best quality product that will deliver the efficiencies and benefits that are associated with this project, ultimately leading to more timely throughput of casework and communication of results to partners. The main emphasis for our operating model project at the moment is very much on consolidation of the changes that we have made thus far, and we've already alluded to the impact of not receiving the full investment in the operating model and what the subsequent downstream impact that has on the intended outcomes. We have undertaken a significant piece of work within the project that runs alongside the consolidation of the changes already made, which will present an articulation of what the impact has been on not securing the full operating model rules and where they have impacted on our ability to achieve all of the intended outcomes of the op model project. That's being worked on within the project. It will be presented to our Forensic Services SMT and through the Forensic Services Change Programme Board, and obviously I'll provide an update on that at subsequent change updates for the committee. We continue within the operating model to undertake our delivery effectiveness reviews, which is looking again at the changes that we have introduced at quite a granular level, what impact have they had, have they achieved the desired outcomes, and how they contribute to the realisation of benefits within the wider programme. I will be providing an update in future reports on key themes and progress against recommendations as part of the change update for the committee at a high level. As I say, these delivery effectiveness reviews are very much at a granular level on specific changes, but I will be updating on a higher level impact that it may have on the realisation of benefits. We also have our central purchasing project, which is tracking Amber against the original programme plan, because we've been working specifically across a range of activity within forensic services, looking at our current approach to purchasing. We've undertaken some significant data analysis to look and see when mapping the current as-is position, and that will be shared with SMT colleagues before being assimilated into the project plan for that activity, which will again come back to the committee in future updates. In terms of the RD&I strategy, our research, development and innovation strategy, we had a very successful knowledge exchange event, and thank you very much to those members of the committee that were able to come along. We have used the outputs of that knowledge exchange event plus internal stakeholder engagement to prepare a draft which has been circulated with our Director and Chief Operating Officer, as well as key external partners. Some further work is ongoing on that, initially with our SPA corporate colleagues who are supporting the development of that strategy, and then further drafts will be circulated more widely amongst internal and external stakeholders about the future direction of travel with that RD&I strategy. Finally, in terms of benefits realisation, there is an update contained within the report. Work is now ongoing to review areas still to be delivered, as I've said, in terms of the operating model. But most importantly, at the highest level, our change programme has a dual ambition of providing a better service to our partners and ultimately the communities of Scotland, and also then providing a better working environment for our staff. So we have now formally engaged with colleagues in Police Scotland, primarily the chair of the Forensic Performance Operation Group, around how we begin to map and measure the changes that we've introduced thus far, and what the actual impact is in terms of service improvement being felt by our partners, and that will be supported by the work of the customer survey, which I know is a further update. And we've also had various staff surveys undertaken both internally and with colleagues in Police Scotland, and I'm working closely with Paul Stewart, who's leading on the output of those staff surveys as well, to be able to map progress against the higher level benefits included within the report. I'll pause there for any questions and comments.
Thanks for that, John. I've got one question to start with, which is FS core operating system and data migration. That's now tracking as red. It was green the last time we met, so that's a pretty fundamental deterioration without even hitting amber. Now you've got a revised timetable in there, and you've got an explanation about this. What assurance can you give us? What level of confidence you have that the revised timetable that's been presented will be met?
So the revised timetable as presented to the committee has been thoroughly reviewed by all of our key strategic stakeholders, SPA colleagues, Police Scotland colleagues, Digital Division colleagues at all tactical and strategic levels. So we've very much engaged with them. We have the resources in place. The only thing that could impact on the timeline is the requirement to take this project through a technical assurance framework review, which is scheduled for week beginning the 13th of October, which is the Scottish Government Technical Assurance Framework Review. So there may be some comments and outputs from that review that we may need to action. But we have all of the stakeholders on board and everybody is very much behind the revised procurement approach, which we've got, as I said, agreement at strategic and tactical level on that being the best way. So we are very much assured. We have also, as I've mentioned in previous updates, we have engaged with the market in a formal request for information process, and we have gone back to those that responded with being led by our procurement colleagues by way of update on the timeline, and had some assurance that there's still significant interest in the market to respond with a non-specific tender. So we are confident that we will get the returns that we are looking for there. And also we have committed full-time dedicated resource into the project internally within forensic services through some key secondments, which will really help drive the project forward.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other questions from anyone? Angela.
So just building on what you've said, Paul, I think that we recognise just the complexity of this and the number of different teams that are involved in something like this. I just wanted to ask, has it been reinforced the necessity for everybody to play their part and to stick to the deadlines or the dates that they've committed to? And is that commitment quite explicit on the part of all the players in the programme?
Yes, thank you. Yes, very much. So sitting underneath this timeline replan, there is an extensive project plan that clearly articulates roles and responsibilities for all of the key players, not just forensic services. And I think what has really happened with this this revised approach and getting engagement at all of the levels, both strategic and tactical, I would say before there had maybe been an emphasis on engagement at a tactical level, but now that we have a senior strategic group of heads of department and directors as well within our partners, everybody is very much aware of the timeline, and there is key listed nominated activities sitting below it. So I would say in short that yes, we've got all stakeholders firmly on board now with the complexities of the project and the need to meet the timelines here.
And can I just also suggest, if it's not there, that there is a very clear escalation procedure, so that if there are inevitable delays, these are, addressed really, really quickly, given the timeline has been significantly extended. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Fiona Douglas, we wanted to come in at this point. You're muted.
Sorry, just to build on Joanne's comments there, and it's great that we have got really good support from colleagues within procurement and digital division. I'd call out in particular in this project, and also from a change perspective, there is a lot of focus within Police Scotland around transformation in general that is going on at the moment under the leadership of DCC Beck Smith. So we are always at the behest of the overall prioritisation process, and that does bring risk for forensic services projects in terms of prioritisation across the broader portfolio. But we, as Joanne says, have got good buy-in to the core operating system project from across the different departments within Police Scotland. Thank you.
Katharina.
Thank you very much. It is disappointing to see the FS costs project go from green to red, but at the same time, I also welcome the change in approach as well. So I think it would have been good to have a degree of kind of advance notice, and there's certain things that you can foresee, other things that you can't foresee. But I think overall, the pivot in terms of how you're procuring and how you're going out to market, from my perspective, definitely makes sense. So I think with the assurance now that everything has been consulted on and checked, and sort of the internal escalation mechanisms that you have in place, I think if you can stick to a timeline, it's good. But I think overall, I suppose it makes sense to do that course correction now rather than continue and in the end not get the best results. So I suppose, whilst I'm expressing disappointment at kind of the fact that it's going to take longer, at the same time, I also think it is necessary, and by the sounds of it, it is necessary, and it's going to lead to a better end result. I think, this. So I'm complimenting you on your change in direction. Although, as I say, it is disappointing that it will take longer naturally.
Thank you.
Observation rather than a question, I suppose.
Yeah. No, thank you, and I understand the comments between tracking green and then tracking red. It was we had been operating on advice from procurement and digital division from colleagues at a tactical level, and we're ready to go progress with the ITT as per the original program plan. But when we broadened out the wider discussion at a more strategic level, so we've learned some lessons on that, and we've very much got that strategical and tactical joined up approach going forward now. But that's the reason why there wasn't it wasn't a slow slippage. It was quite a dramatic turnaround on the timeline, which won't happen again because of our more joined up approach going forward.
Understood. Thank you.
Great. I'm conscious that we've been going for 2 and a bit hours. Can I suggest maybe a 5 or 10 minute comfort break? And then we'll try and drive through the rest of the business as quickly as we can. Can I maybe suggest we come back at past and then we'll see how we get on with the rest of it? Okay. You just stop your video. I think that should be enough. Can restart the meeting. Item 7 is the Police Scotland and SPA joint biometrics strategy. So we have Helen Haworth from Forensics and Gillian Jones from Police Scotland introducing this. So over to you guys.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I was going to pick this item up, and we have Gillian here as well to answer any questions. So a partnership approach has been taken by Forensic Services and Police Scotland to provide the draft of the joint biometric strategy, which we have presented to you today. And again, I will take the paper as read. So this action was identified through the review activity by the Scottish Biometric Commissioner. And it defines our approach to the collection, retention and use of our biometric data. That's to ensure that the compliance with legal and regulatory frameworks. The document outlines our strategic objectives, which you can see on page 5, as well as the governance and accountability requirements, which we have documented on page 13. This strategy is supported and underpinned by a plan of activity, which we are nearly just finalising. And this takes into consideration the feedback from various internal reviews, BDO audits, and the assurance reviews conducted by the Scottish Biometric Commissioner. So, as we know, the biometrics which we take play a vital role in the work delivered by Forensic Services and Police Scotland. And this aligns to our vision and strategy within both of our organisations. So I would like to ask the board members and appreciate any feedback prior to our public consultation on this strategy. Thank you.
That was going to be my first question, was about what consultation with the public there is there, because you've got all the stakeholders listed, but the only one that I would say that kind of speaks for the public is the Biometrics Commissioner. Of course, he's an appointee. So how is this is going out for consultation? Where is it going to be and who is it going to be consulted with?
So obviously we wanted to get the document finalised in as much as we could before we did that public consultation, and obviously that will be discussed with our SPA colleagues of how that's going to be done.
Okay, great. No, I have to say, I think it looks really good, and thanks to yourselves and Police Scotland for pulling it together. This is phenomenally sensitive, as you know, and I think you've done a very good job at this, what is a draft. So, so well done on that. And when do you reckon it will come back from consultation?
So we have various comments, Scottish Biometric Commissioner being one of them. We're hoping to get colleagues' comments from the board and yourselves as soon as possible. And once we have those, we'll ratify the draft, send that to publishing, and then obviously public consultation, and then can come back to you. So probably I would expect by the next meeting.
And so I'm just trying to still, I'm not sure I quite got my question answered as to how is it going to be consulted with? Is this going out to the general public? Is this, or what? Fiona, you got your hand up.
Yeah, there's still some work to do to finalise what the approach would be to any public consultation, Paul. So we will, as Helen said, have those discussions with colleagues in the authority, and we'll determine what that approach will be. I'm happy to take an action that will come back and confirm a time frame and approach for that once we've had those discussions.
And I'm assuming this fits or is in tandem with the forensic strategy and the police strategies.
Yes, it is.
Aligned is the word I should say.
Absolutely, it's aligned with the Forensic Services strategy and also with the 2030 vision within Police Scotland.
And if we could get progress reports on this, maybe quarterly, that would be helpful.
No problem, Chair. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members on this? Okay, super. Okay, we'll see that back in due course. Great, thanks very much for that. Anything from Police Scotland on this? Not compulsory? No, that's fine. I'll just move us on then. Okay, that's biometric strategy. Item 8, short life working group on the staff survey, and I think that's Paul Stewart introducing that.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just a short introduction and some detail on the staff survey. And what is being discussed across the focus groups. So we are seeing, you know, a great interest in the staff survey, and I'm really pleased with the uptake from staff. We've now moved into 5 different focus groups, which are culture, fairness of opportunity, leadership improvement, the working environment, and inclusivity and belonging. So the focus groups are led by our members of staff. So each of the leads is from the front end service delivery element of our organisation, and that's been deliberate. And the short life working group, or the main short life working group, has now met on 6 occasions, and the focus has been on creating the themes, pulling the groups together, establishing the focus groups, and getting staff into a comfortable position to engage and to contribute towards some of the improvements that we might wish to make. So they're now identifying and looking to identify areas where they might want to dig in a little bit to see where improvements can be made. And you can see, I'll just take a quick example of the culture group and their first meeting, and the feedback that we received in that regard talks about collaboration and connectivity between our working sites. It talks about agreeing simple behaviours that are expected across the organisation around respecting individuals and individuality. They're looking at areas of neurodiversity and the potential for there to be mandatory training for that. They're looking at the introduction of team charters. So these are just some of the elements that are beginning to be discussed. There are no recommendations yet in any of these. These are areas that are now being discussed, and there's other key themes that are coming through from the focus groups, including recognition of challenges associated with some values and behaviours, and staff feeling that their issues are listened to or taken seriously, and some perceived issues on career progression opportunities and application of process, all of which is identified in the survey, all of which has came through to us from the survey, and staff are now engaged in bringing all of that together. What I would say is that it's been really positive, the level of engagement so far with staff. I think it's been helpful to have staff on board, and what we will now look to do is to cement and identify the areas where there are challenges and where improvements can be made, and work with staff to identify what action may be taken to implement and communicate the improvements. So I'll pause there and take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Any questions, Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Paul, and really welcome progress in this area. And obviously, you've touched there on some of the related issues that we picked up at the development day. And you know, I'm conscious that health and well-being of staff generally has been underscored through a number of the things we've discussed today. So this is really, really important work, and it's good to hear of the progress and the engagement. I'm noting the approach that's been taken in terms of the focus groups and the involvement of non-managerial staff in leading those groups, and I welcome that approach. But I just wondered if you wanted, from an engagement point of view, but I just wondered if you wanted to say any more about the opportunities that presents, but also whether or not it presents any risks in terms of taking this work forward.
Yeah, I think I've been very open, and the staff have been very open, Chris, just to getting involved in the groups. And I think the opportunity, we are seeing members of staff coming forward. I've had a number of one-to-one engagements with staff who have had some trepidation around coming onto the groups, and some trepidation around revealing what their true thoughts and opinions are. And I've been working really hard with the focus groups and with individuals across the organisation to promote that level of engagement. I guess in terms of risk, I'm seeing that there may well be some risk in terms of the focus groups producing areas that are potentially specific to one department, or potentially specific to one site or one location across the organisation. But what the main working group will do there is bring all of that back in and promote discussion in a much wider context. So It's not that the groups are entirely made up of front-end service delivery staff. There are some managerial staff dotted around the groups, and I will coordinate and look at the broader picture when we bring each of the focus groups back into the main group, to allow for confirmation of thinking, to allow for some challenge of thinking and some wider discussion in that regard. So it's a work in progress, very much a work in progress, and it's something that is taking steps forward, but there's just a wee bit of challenge around ensuring that it's taken forward in the right way. I don't want to undo any of the work by doing or taking any action that would turn staff in a different direction. So baby steps, I would suggest, but certainly a momentum going forward.
Thank you, Paul. And yeah, I mean, as I said, I really welcome the approach. I think it's really positive in terms of transparency, in terms of engagement. But I think you've picked up there in your response, some of the risks that there might be in terms of coordination and coherence and coalescence and so on. So it's good to see that you're actively aware of those and managing those. And I think we look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
So we'll get another report back in October.
Yes.
So yeah. Great. Well, we'll get an update then. Okay, I'll move us then on to item. Oops, bear with me a second. Item number 9, which is the customer survey update, and that's Craig Donachie introducing that. Craig, welcome.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you can hear me okay. I'll take it that everybody's had a chance to read the paper, but I'll pick out a few points as we go through, as well as good organisational practice, a customer survey and a benchmark to see how you're actually performing. It's one of these things that is defined within the ISO 17025 standard. So we have, through our management system and our accreditation, the requirement to perform a survey. Within our procedures, we conduct this every 2 years. It's very much focused on service delivery at the scene, within the laboratory, and on the services that we provide to Police Scotland, the Crown Office and PERC. So the survey was run from beginning of May to the end of May, and we got an improved response on previous surveys, with 91% of the feedback coming from Police Scotland, and then 9% from Crown. Unfortunately, we didn't receive a response from PERC, but we'll take that forward with communication channels and look at that moving forward. We got response from most Police Scotland divisions and Crown Office areas. And looking at the actual highlights from the feedback, 62% of respondents were satisfied or very satisfied with response times, particularly for the Group 1 and 2 crimes, which is as we expected. However, for the crime groups 3 to 7 and non-crime, there was certainly not as a positive feedback as we had hoped. I think that's representative of perhaps where we are with implementation of the operating model. We are still actively looking to improve those areas through the work that Joanne and colleagues have been doing. And I think it's demonstrated, as we've mentioned earlier, with the investment that we've got. We will move things forward, but it's over a longer period of time. As far as scene exam activity, we got a very good 82% response for satisfaction at the scene. And again, timeliness of laboratory activity was not as positive, with a lower percentage of feedback there. Overall, over 76% were satisfied or very satisfied with the range of services we provide, which is again essential and feeds back into the Westminster report that Forensic Services provides that overview and a wide range of forensic science activities. And I think that's accepted and appreciated by the people that we work with and work for, and we have a 74% with the overall quality of service, which is consistent with previous years, and we will be looking to run the survey again, probably Q1 2027-28, to make sure that we have got that consistency in the service delivery feedback. And that's all I was really going to mention at this time, but I'm happy to take any questions. There is substantial data and information behind this paper, which colleagues in the Forensic Services SMT have got access and will be reviewing and taking forward.
Thanks very much for that, Craig. I would say, I mean, I think it's generally a very positive report. It's nice to see, I'm looking at the 82% of people that are satisfied with the performance of scenes, and I think that's to be welcome. I am conscious that you know, the groups 3 to 7 crime satisfaction seem to be lower, and there just seems to be a causal link between timeliness or turnaround time and satisfaction. Am I kind of right in that assumption, that broad assumption?
Yes, it's that focus on being able to get results to officers, and even there's other questions regarding being provided updates and actually knowing where things are in the system without having to, you know, call in and get that contact. So I think there's areas there that we can look at improving because it's valued, but it's not being provided as often as officers would like. So that's an area that we can look at and look to improve on.
Any other questions or comments on this from members? I think it's, as these things go, generally very positive. So well done to everyone involved.
Thank you.
Right, so I'm conscious of time. I'm going to move us on to item 10, which is digital forensics, next steps and timeline for progression, and that's Superintendent or Chief Superintendent, sorry, I demoted you, Andy Patrick, who's here to speak to that. So, Chief Superintendent Patrick, over to you.
Thanks, Chair. I was only recently promoted, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all.
Only busted you one rank.
Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. This is my first time, actually, I think, any of these committees, so please be gentle with me. I'll maybe just kind of frame where we are at the moment and then answer any questions on the paper in relation to ISO and digital forensics. So I'm 2 weeks in the job in terms of working on cyber and fraud, which encompasses policing in a digital order programme and also digital forensics. So that's a large portfolio to kind of get your head around it, and I am getting my head around it, but bringing the sort of two functions of cyber and fraud together with a change programme and digital forensics for the whole of the police service in Scotland is a bit of a challenge. I do have a background in local policing, managing multiple divisions in different areas, major investigations, and some 31 years in the police. So I'm kind of well ingrained in terms of what's on the go. Just in terms of the paper, I think you'll know when you read through it, and I know you'll have had these papers before you over a number of months in relation to timelines for some of this work, especially around about, you know, when we're going to bring in ISO in Aberdeen and how we're going to roll it out across the rest of Scotland. So I'm really keen to make improvements in relation to the digital forensics space. I'm keen to resolve where we are and make us efficient as possible. And what I would really like to do is probably come back in the near future with a real plan around about how I'm going to take it forward and exactly how ISO fits within the ISO accreditation, fits within the whole sort of digital and evidence strategy as part of my kind of vision for the future. I'm happy to touch on some of that today. I was just in a front door session bidding kind of for a technical capability to kind of help us with some of that stuff. But really for me, you know, I recognise, because I've kind of worked in this world for a long time, how digital forensics supports every sort of facet of policing, not just the stuff that takes place within the labs. And I really are keen to make things more efficient, and ISO forms an integral part of that, because I think, you know, learning from what happens in wet forensics is absolutely key to how we take things forward. And just lastly, probably before I kind of move on to the paper, so I think even in my short time in terms of kind of coming in, I've identified where we can learn a lot from wet forensics, particularly in relation to forensic gateways. And I do think we need to move to that in terms of digital forensics and understand the sort of work that goes through those things. As I mentioned just earlier, we need some technical solutions to try and think about how we probably use the cloud more and think about our digital data sharing capability. And that's not evidence, it's data before it becomes analysed and gets turned into evidence. And also I've managed to understand a lot in relation to how wet forensics works in relation to Section 280 of the Criminal Justice Act, and how we might be able to get increased credibility for our staff that work within the labs, which will assist in the admissibility of forensic evidence. So 2 months right into it, obviously speaking at the committee now in relation to ISO, which I do understand, but I would imagine the committee will have lots of questions for me in relation to how I'm going to deliver on ISO.
Great, thanks for that. And it's a particularly tough gig I think you've got, so so good luck with it, and it'd be good to get your suggested plan soon. I don't know what your thoughts and timelines for that is.
Yeah, so I suppose the front door session that I had just this morning around a bit of a technical capability supports the infrastructure of what the vision for the future might be. And I suppose even in my short time, you know, understanding how we think about the work that goes through the labs to enable us to create a little bit of capacity to move ISO accreditation along more quickly is right at the sort of forefront of my mind. And I think, you know, everything in policing is around about prioritisation and how we can, you know, push through work and turn it into evidence as quickly as possible. So my plan is around about, you know, a tiered approach throughout the service, and, you know, some of our capabilities in relation to desk at the moment and screen recording capabilities for frontline officers is going to take some of that demand away from the lab. And that isn't just something about me talking about something in the future. You know, desk is rolled out across 10 of our 13 divisions. Screen recording has been ratified and accepted by the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. So that's work that's actually happening now, which means that actually from victims of crime, we're not taking everybody's devices off them and bring them back to a lab. So I see that as a real benefit. I think there's a lot more to do in terms of local policing divisions around about how we provide that support to frontline police officers, much in line with the Chief's 2030 vision. And then latterly, obviously our capability within the labs, how we ISO accredit them, standardise the process that takes place, and, you know, make sure that everything that happens up and down the country is absolutely professional, and probably also increase their capabilities to actually get them out of the labs and support some of the frontline activities, which we've been doing recently with much success, which I'm really pleased about.
Just touching on that, does that mean that at the moment you've got the capacity and the capability to progress ISO accreditation without a diminution in service?
That's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to continue with that. So I still have there are still teams that are absolutely working towards ISO accreditation in Aberdeen. I know the paper makes reference to technical posts, and I am actually looking at models that are up and down the UK around about, you know, how I can roll that out quicker with the greatest effect, recognising that probably my lab in the West down in Govan takes 2/3 of the work across the whole of Scotland. So I'm just probably taking time to take stock and think about how can I roll this out as quickly as possible to have the greatest impact.
So I asked you about when we could see your plan. When do you reckon you'll be able to get all of this sorted out, the accreditation, etc.? How long do you think that will be? Because we've had various timetables and they've always slipped, and, you know, our kind of patience has run a bit thin. So bearing that, you get in the block, when do you think we'll be able to see a result here?
So what I'd like to do is maybe come back to the next available opportunity to maybe talk through what my vision is for the whole strategy for digital data and evidence, and maybe then outline exactly where I think ISO fits into that, and perhaps provide you with a bit of reassurance that you know, I am committed to providing that service for the whole of Scotland in terms of police officers, and actually where ISO fits into that. I do need to dig a little bit deeper, being completely honest, to be able to come back and say, here's the timeline, here's where I think it's at, and I don't want to kind of come here on the first day and you know, set something that I can't achieve.
No, that's fair enough. Our next committee meeting is in October. Is that far enough away for you to work something up by then, or do you need later?
I think I'd be happy to come back and maybe outline my vision a little bit in more detail and try and firm up on the timeline if that was acceptable to the committee. I think it'd be a good place for me to be, to just take stock, come back with a kind of clear vision for the future, and try and give you a sort of firmer timeline, or at least a full understanding of the direction I'm trying to take it.
Yeah. Okay. Angela?
So thank you for that, Patrick. That was really helpful. A couple of questions, and you mentioned it about learning from others. And I know you're just in the door, so I'm not expecting you to answer this, but when you do come back, it would be really good just to understand what other forces have done, how they've approached it, and what learning we can take from them, things that have gone well, but equally important things that perhaps haven't gone so well that we need to bear in mind. And the other aspect is the reliance on other teams within Police Scotland, and I'm thinking in particular of the digital team. I just wanted to check, is there a degree of prioritisation for some of this for digital forensics?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I have probably pushed really hard since kind of coming into place, because for me, I recognise that as we move to a world where 90% of crime has a digital element, we absolutely need to have the capabilities in the background to support some of that. Like probably in the last couple of months, I've been getting up to speed with what the Policing in a Digital World programme kind of covers, and there's a number of aspects to that: ISO accreditation, digital forensics, and also the kind of fraud strategy, joining report fraud with the City of London. So I'm absolutely pushing in that direction. I've managed to get some additional resources to work in that team, and I'm pushing quite hard, as I hope you'll hear, just in the next few months, to kind of take it forward. Right now, I'm content that I've got the resources to support my strategy, so hopefully I will be able to push it on and take it in a place where we actually start to deliver for the officers and public across Scotland.
Well, that's great, and I mean, I do think it is important, that accreditation, in terms of that public assurance. So yeah, we'll be supportive of what you can do. Thank you.
I think the accreditation is really important as well. I think that standardisation of practice across Scotland, and when I look at wet forensics, and I know I think equally it was challenging in relation to the wet forensic world from what I hear before me coming in, but I think it really is important that we get that right, because it kind of professionalises everything we do in relation to practice within the labs. And I do think, the outcome of that might be that Section 2A for the kind of section, the certification that will allow us to kind of present our evidence in court in a more kind of professional, structured way, similar to England and Wales, because I think that's exactly where we need to be.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Andy. And I just wanted to come in and to offer our continued support in what I know is a really difficult journey that Police Scotland are on in terms of gaining and then maintaining accreditation. It's good to see that there's already learning from physical forensics into digital, and I think we have an opportunity to continue to do that. I would also like to pick up with you your perspective on the Westminster Commission's report, particularly around digital forensics, and there's a number of areas of that report that focus on that. So again, it'd be good to pick up on that outside the meeting. Thank you.
No, thanks very much. I did have you written down on my list to kind of come and see you. So I think we'll maybe make that involved and come and see you sooner rather than later, if that's okay, Fiona. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that. I think I'll move us on to the next item. Thanks very much for that, Chief Superintendent Patrick. I'll move us on then to item 11, which is committee work plan, which is for noting. And that, I think, concludes the public part of the meeting. We've only got a small substantive item, risk, in the private session. So if we can cease the broadcast, and if attendees that don't need to be at that, if we can say farewell to them, and thank you very much for your help this morning.